Chris Gorfist and I are going to be talking with the legendary Michael Boyle of the S&C world. And I can't wait to get into this. I absolutely loved your presentation, Mike. And it wasn't just because you mentioned me several times, even though that was very kind of you. It's just so nice to hear a weight room centric guy finally start to get it.
Wow, it starts right in. How we go? We're at the 1 minute mark. You're right. Yeah, I you know me. I've been singing your praises since before I brought you out to speak. But I mean, the reality is, and I've said this 1,000 times in the last 2 years. Your influence has been the single biggest program change maybe that we've ever undergone. So, I mean, that's a really big thing because I'm like you, I'm 40 years in. So to say that somebody, made us really pivot and really look at things differently is a big deal.
Well, and I think too that it's interesting that it wasn't the complexity of what I talked about. It was rather the simplicity, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any complexity to what you talk about at all. Like, to me, it's so ridiculously, that's what I mean. I think it's sometimes that like bop on the head. I always say that I didn't use this slide in this talk, but I have a Dumb and Dumber slide, the aha or the duh moment, you've got to decide which one it is. And it was more like the duh. I can't believe that I didn't really think about this or think about it in this way or frame it this way or whatever it was at that time. And part of it is, like you said, part of it is just we've got a built-in bias. We're strength coaches. I mean, I'm a strength coach. You're in a different world. You guys are track coaches, but I'm not. Like, I came out of, I've been in strength and conditioning my entire adult life. Literally, I started coaching at 21 years old in college and very much did what everybody else did, at least in the beginning. Or again, I'd probably not what everybody else did, but it was pretty conventional. I mean, we back squatted and we did hang cleans and we did bench presses and we did 1 rep maxes. And then, slowly I progressed into a different thought process, but not to where we are from a speed standpoint. And part of that is just, I didn't think we were doing a good enough job getting people faster. So you have to keep investigating that. Like, you have to keep looking and saying, okay, is there a missing piece? And, feed the cats, but really sprinting and timing,
right?
Well, that's what I mean. Timing. Well, that's what I'm saying. I was going to say sprinting, not running. We ran a lot, but sprinting was almost elective in the sense that some people were probably giving you 100%. Some of my more talented guys were probably giving us 80 until we brought the timer out. And again, I should have known this. I can go back, 20 times in the last 20 years to the point, I love the Buddhist quote when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I feel like that was the situation with you. Because Chris, to be honest, we can flatter Chris a little bit here. One of the guys that works with me has been talking about Chris for 10 years.
He's really talking about my guitar collection is what he's talking about.
Just about timing it. But, and I was kind of like, like I said in the presentation, it's a pain in the ass. We got to set up the timers. It takes too long. We're running sprints. Like, I had every excuse in the book. And the funny thing is, that was the one difference. He runs our other facility, and he would have his timer out all the time, timing people because of Chris. And then for whatever reason, Tony resonated more with me. And suddenly, and I don't even know, like, I don't remember which article it was. Like, I don't even know if Record Rank Published was the first one or that.
Oh, it was 10 facts I wish every
football coach knew or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah,
I was very hyperbolic in the whole thing, making fun of bodybuilders and blah, blah, blah. And I think you said that I was a fellow heretic. And I had to look up heretic. And when I looked it up, I liked it.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, now you use it all the time. See, so that's good. I'm glad I contributed.
Except when it's in the historical sense of burning the heretics, then it's not so great.
No, that was not a good thing. No, I still have nightmares about that. And one other thing about your it's a total flip that one of the reasons why you didn't sprint was because of injury fears.
Right.
And now it's not only a lack of fear, but you believe that without sprinting, guys will get injured.
Absolutely. That there's no question. So, and it's fun. You saw JB's article, JB Marin's article, and I referenced it in the presentation, but it's great because he leads in with the article that, good athletes get hurt doing high-speed sprinting. Therefore, good athletes shouldn't do high-speed sprinting. Like he leads with something effectively like that in the first paragraph of the article. And I think that was a lot of what we looked at, in terms of what we saw as strength and conditioning coaches, because again, we were just doing it all wrong, right? We're running 40s with a bunch of dumbass football coaches, and we're doing it at the wrong time, and we're doing it without the right preparation. But the net result is we're getting, whatever. Every time we timed guys, we'd get 3 or 4 pulls every time. And I used to dread those days. I'd be like, oh God, like, do we have to time 40s? Like, does it really matter? And at that time, we were doing a lot of 10s. And the crazy part is I had unbelievable success with NFL Combine guys doing exactly what I'm doing now, or a modification of what I'm doing now. We timed all the time because we knew they were being evaluated based on time. But I think generally in training, we just felt like we don't have time for that. We don't have time for the setup. We don't have room in the weight room. There are all these things because, again, we were strength coaches. I was a heretic when my first big weight room had track surface in it, and every person that came into my weight room, to a man, walked in, looked at the empty space. We had 4 lanes of, at that time, Mondo track, and everybody was like, "What are you going to put here?" And I was like, "People." And they were like, "What do you mean? Are you still waiting for stuff to come in?" I'm like, "Nope, not waiting for anything to come in. We're going to have a big open space where we can do our sprints." But we did like Vern Gambetta stuff, pal drill, lean, fall, run, all that stuff. And that's all good stuff for warm up. But it really, the difference, and obviously you watched the presentation, is when you realize, and I've said this to everybody, when you start to see sprinting as a tool versus a test, everything changes. And that was what you got me thinking about, because you're sitting here saying, wait a second, I don't care if my sprinters lift. And I had to think about that. Because I remember listening to you say that, and I'm like, he doesn't care if his sprinters lift, but his sprinters are getting really fast. And you start looking and saying, well, wait a second, why is that? And that's where, like, I had that Carl Lewis, Ben Johnson slide, because I can always remember people talking about, Lewis kind of was disdainful of the weight room. You never saw videos of Lewis lifting, and you never heard stories about how much weight Lewis lifted. And you heard things like that he didn't really lift, or that he didn't like to lift. And he was probably like an extensions and curls and calf raise kind of guy, just go in and do some stuff. So he said he did it. But but the common denominator with those guys was sprinting. And that's, so I guess, like, for me, that was, the big epiphany was, okay, wait a second. We need to, now we've got this super powerful tool, and we got to figure out how to wield it, because I think that's the difference. And that's why, like, my progression is a real sissy progression compared to what you do. We do all 10-yard fly, but we start with 5-yard fly in, then we go 10-yard fly in, then we go 15-yard fly in. This summer we progressed to 20-yard fly in, and we still had no one get hurt. And the difference for me is we did thousands of reps because of our business. I mean, we're not talking, and not track kids. It's funny because I started today, I'm thinking about doing this talk. I just had my son at the gym. I literally just left the gym. I just shoveled down food for 14 minutes and then came and got on the phone with you guys. But my next talk is going to be cats to kittens, or kittens to cats, because that's really what we're doing. We're not taking genetically gifted people who want to run track. We're not even generally taking genetically gifted people. We're taking anybody.
And your own son was not very fast.
No, he was very slow.
Right? He's really improved.
Oh, frighteningly. I mean, this summer or last summer, he made the 75 cut to go to the under 15 national team for lacrosse. So he was in Baltimore, which theoretically was the top 75 kids in that age group. And the biggest difference in him from 12 to 15 is his ability to run. But you're talking about now standing 10, and Chris will appreciate this. 187 was the first day. 187 is sundial slow. I mean, it's like really, and he looked at me, he's like, I'm slow. And I was like, yes, you are. He said, we can change that. But I bet within 2 weeks, he was 167 because he was just starting to figure out like, oh, if I try harder, I actually run faster. And that's kind of what we're seeing is when you put, like you said, record, rank, publish, when you put the timer out there and you tell someone the time, it's very direct feedback. And you're into the Peter Drucker thing, what gets measured gets managed. And people start looking at this and our guys, it's interesting. That's probably your grandson in the back in the picture under the feed the cat looking at, right? But people start figuring out, if you listen to like the Altus guys or whatever shapes, they start to get to the right shape. And that's what we've realized. Like we don't do any teaching of running at all because we don't, and this is what the presentation was about. We don't have time. I don't have time to teach running. Right now, because of COVID, I have 1 hour to take a kid through a strength and conditioning program, which means, warm up, speed, plyos, power, strength, 1 hour. And that means that warm up, speed, plyos gets 12 minutes because that's what we can afford to budget out of that hour to be able to, have time to get them properly warmed up and to do the things we need to do. And to have, we have 36 minutes in the weight room. That's it. 3 12-minute blocks. So, it's a lot of like, necessity is the mother of invention. I always said, I was talking to somebody else on a podcast today and I'm like the king of cliches, but I always say cliches are cliches because they're true. The reason people keep saying the same things over and over again is because generally it's true. And so we figured out that trying to run fast makes you a better runner. And you probably looked at those videos. If you look at those kids and realize they're all 14-year-old boys and you look at their lower body mechanics, they're all decent. Yes, you could pick 10 things apart on each guy. But if you look at shapes, they're in the right shape, extension wise, where their foot crosses their knee. There's a lot of things that are going right just by virtue of them trying to run fast. Sorry, I can turn a 15-second question into a 15-minute diatribe.
So when you made the shift, when you went from being all weight room and introduced sprinting, how did you sell that to your tried and true customers who had been with you for a while and people who came there and expected something to happen and then all of a sudden there's a track out there?
Well, the good thing is that's what most people wanted to do anyway. The vast majority of people don't really want to lift. If I gave them Tony's spiel and said, hey, you don't even have to lift weights and you can get faster, all we're going to do is go outside and run, you'd have a lot more signups than I get. We were pretty regimented in terms of really being more, we were, like I said, strength coaches. When we started out, I was the weight coach. Then I became the strength coach. Then we slowly became strength and conditioning coaches. And then we somehow became performance enhancement specialists or something. But it was a really easy sell. Plus, I'm a really good salesman. That's one thing I'm good at. I can look at somebody and I have no problem saying I was wrong. Something? And I talk about a guy like Tony all the time. Hey, I met this guy, Tony, and he, this idea is unbelievable. And we're going to make a massive difference in terms of speed. And then they do it and it's fun. Like we sprinted tonight and we had to cut them off. Like we did 4 fly 10s with a 10-yard fly in. We could have spent 20 minutes doing just that. And the boys would have been very happy to, talk shit to each other and, figure out who ran faster than who and all that stuff. But it's like, okay, we're done. 4, we got to start lifting. Cause I still do believe in the weight room for a number of reasons because, and it's, it's the old Saturday Night Live skit. The weight room been very, very good to me. You know what I mean? Like when I really look at, we've been able to develop some really good athletes, some really powerful athletes, some really strong athletes, some very resilient, injury resistant athletes doing what we're doing. So I don't want to kind of throw out the baby with the bathwater, but at the same time, it's figuring out, I always, I use that pie analogy. How do I only got 6 slices and I got to figure out, what's going to be in each one of those slices. And that's kind of where, that's why where we're at right now.
Well, one of the things when you did go towards more of a sprint based thought process, it didn't hurt your lifting at all, did it?
Oh no, God, no, not a bit. But it hurt our time for lifting. So we're doing a lot more, especially with like my son and his friends, they're all 15 going on 16 now. And we're more into like the 1x20 style stuff because we don't have time for multiple set training. We don't have time to spend a lot. We've got to pick our, whatever, 6 or 7 really big bang for the buck exercises and do them. And we've got to get those exercises done at an appropriate level of intensity. And again, we've got to get that done in 36 minutes, which is really what we have from a time constraint standpoint. Because for us, we're running a business, and the business is based on, you got to get, it's like the restaurant, you got to turn the tables, right? If you can't get people in and get people out, like, some people talk, well, we do this, we do that. I'm like, that's great. You'll be freaking poor your whole life. That's fine with me. I have no problem. If you want to spend 2 hours, coaching one person, you better find a lot of really rich people, and you better find a place where you can do it where they're not going to charge you rent. Because I don't care how much you charge an hour, you're not going to make enough money, to make it a business. And so for us, we've got to balance the business with the programming, and then try to come up with the best programming that we can that makes business sense. And COVID forced us to.
You talked about the 6 or 7 lifts that give you the best bang for the buck. I would be interested in hearing what those are.
So for us, hang clean, I'm a huge hang clean person. I think everybody should hang clean. I'm again, I've seen people increase their vertical jump by a foot over the course of 4 years, and I would attribute the vast majority of that to hang clean. And people will argue that point with me, and I'm like, whatever, argue all you want. I don't care. I'm not stopping doing hang clean. So, trap bar deadlift the same way. I think trap bar deadlift is a really high value lift as long as somebody's got a good back. We do what we call a 1-leg deadlift, which I called a skater squat early on, but it's really more of a deadlift motion. We do a pure 1-leg squat. So, standing, not a pistol, but the free leg is not touching the ground. We bench press, we chin up, those, ring row, like it's literally for us, we need a vertical and horizontal pull. We need some type of horizontal push. We need a knee dominant exercise. We need a hip dominant exercise. And then, I heard Cal making fun of core the other day, but you can't go wrong sprinkling a couple core exercises in there. It's like, I always said it's one of those things that if I find out 10 years from now that it was really bad for you, I will have wasted 2 minutes of the training session, and it won't really make me feel all that bad. But I do believe when you see somebody try, when people say planks are useless, I'm like, well, how come so many people can't do them? Kind of like, I don't think it's useless. When you start thinking about the function of your anterior abdominal wall being to position your pelvis correctly, and, even looking at it and saying, well, it's remedial. Yeah, it's absolutely remedial. But the vast majority of people suck at it. They don't have really good anti-extension kind of core strength. So developing that, but again, if you said 7, there'd be no core exercises in the top 7 for me, but we throw them in between, we throw a couple in at the end or whatever, just enough to feel like, if we're right, great. If we're wrong, didn't cost us a lot of time, but it's very minimal. And, I've been making fun of, you seen it on Twitter, I'm, periodization, like I'm not a big, I'm a big progressive resistance exercise person. We want to do something harder than what you did before. We want to keep trying to progressively get people stronger. And I'm a big, I don't know if you read Zach DeShan. He'd be another guy for you to get one of these times for a TFC. He's at TCU.
Oh, but the baseball guy. I love the guy.
Yeah, baseball guy. Yeah. Really smart kid. But his book, Movement Over Max, is one of the things he talks about in Movement Over Max is just the idea that, if you can get a kid in middle school and get him to lift twice a week till the time he graduates from high school, you're probably going to have a pretty good athlete because you're going to get about 600 workouts in. And that's reality. Like my son, my son now is almost 6'1", 170. He's not quite 16. He's gained 60 pounds in the last 2 years, all lean something, not muscle, because a lot of it's bone, because he was probably 5'2" when he started. But, and we just go and plug away. We're like freaking the tortoise in the hare, slow and steady wins the race. Just keep going in and try to do one more rep, try to do, we've done all kinds of stuff for a while when they were littler and they weren't as strong. We were on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So, if they could bench the 45-pound bar 5 times, then Next time, try to do it 6. Next time, try to do it 7. I mean, really basic, like PRE shit from, you'd probably find in, Iron Man in 1965 or something like that. And it's nothing, very, very little that people would consider fancy.
So with COVID and your reduced time, you just do your base 7 lifts? Because I think in your presentation, you have someone come once or twice a week, and then you have a sprint as part of that station because you kind of rotated through.
Yeah. And, so we come in and, we foam roll, we stretch, we do our dynamic warm up, we do a circuit. We have what we call sprint jump throw. And really what we use are the old, like the Speed City acceleration ladders, again, for like spacing, the wicket kind of idea, just to get some warm up runs in. And we'll do, a couple of plyo drills, and we'll do a couple of med ball drills, generally some type of rotational throw, some type of chest oriented, shot put or chest pass or whatever it is. A couple runs through the acceleration ladder just to try to get, because I do like some of the Altis stuff. I like the idea of kind of, rhythm and projection. And I do think that's what the wicket idea gives you, but wickets are wicked impractical. How's that for a joke? You know what I mean? Because it just takes way too much time to try to set up wickets correctly. Like if you got a track practice and you can, you want to kill an hour, go ahead. But, when I got like 5 minutes to get warmed up, throwing those acceleration ladders down on the ground and at least having a pattern of, they increase in 6-inch increments, very similar to what like, the idiot's wicket program would be like. If you said, okay, wickets for dummies, Anderson, somebody would say, okay, just, start at this distance and increase 6 inches as you go out. And that's kind of what we do. And then we go run sprints. We go with the timers out, the timers set up. We have a lane set up with like orange construction barriers in the weight room. And it's like, okay, you get 3 times or 4 times, whatever, really whatever our time kind of permits us. We're always looking at who's behind us, who's the next group, who's going to come up on top of us. Cause we're running 8 kids every 15 minutes for, in the afternoon after school, probably, 3 or so hours. So we're going to run a lot of kids through what I would consider to be a really comprehensive strength and conditioning program. Like what I always model it on what I'd do if I was a college strength coach again, because when I was a college strength coach, that's what I did. It's not the ability to impact one person that matters. It's the ability to impact, one team, multiple teams. Like we had one year where we came in like 5th at Boston University in the Sears Trophy. The Sears Trophy is like, overall winning percentage of your athletic department. And we were like up with like Stanford and Notre Dame because we won the national championship in hockey. We had great field hockey. We had great soccer. Like we had a lot of really good teams and they all trained. And, again, people would say, oh, it's generic. You do the same thing with everybody. I'm like, yep, generic. We do pretty much the same thing with everybody because what we're shooting for mass production. And we want to see, can we mass produce strength and speed and power and, get people to improve. And we've been, over time, we've done that pretty successfully because we're still going.
It's interesting that you and I are about the same age. I guess probably the same age. You were born in 50.
We're not about the same age, Tony. We're the same age. We're the same people. People are probably looking at this and thinking, which screen am I looking at right here? If I put a hat on.
And I was thinking today, about some nostalgic stuff. And both of us are coaches' kids as well.
Yep.
Your dad was a coach, but he became a principal. And by the way, anybody that hasn't read the article you wrote about your dad needs to read that article. I was absolutely blown away by that.
Thank you.
What I was thinking was I never touched a free weight until I was a junior in high school. And that would have been like 75 that I started off on universals.
Yeah. Well, see, I was the opposite. I had a 110-pound set in the basement, probably in 73. And I think about what a friggin' weirdo I was. Like, I can't even imagine what people thought of me. I had a hill that I ran like Gail Sayers. Literally, I remember reading an article about Gail Sayers running hills. So I had this hill that I ran and I had the weight set in the basement and I had the chart on the wall and I followed my 110-pound York barbell set chart on the wall. I mean, I did like Jefferson squats. I did like ridiculous shit just because it was on the chart. But And then we had the Universal at the school, so we could go play with the Universal, which then we thought, oh my God, this is unreal. You just stick the pin in. You don't have to change the weights. You don't have to do all that stuff. But relatively quickly, I talk about this in a lot of my talks. I was so lucky that I just kept ending up around really cool people. So, and I told this story probably on every podcast that I've ever done, but I show up at Springfield College in 1977, and I walk up to my dorm, and my dorm director is Mike Wojcik. If you are a football person, you will know that Mike Wojcik was the second longest tenured guy in the National Football League. And his big distinction is that he is tied with Tom Brady for Super Bowl rings. So Mike has 6 and Tom Brady have 6. They're the only people in the National Football League with 6 rings. So Mike was with Jimmy Johnson in Dallas. So Mike was with, Troy Aikman and Darryl Johnson and, Michael Irvin. And like those were his guys early on. And then he went to New England with Parcells and really was the guy that made Brady before Brady became a flake and started telling everybody he doesn't lift weights and he just does bands and, stretches, which is total bullshit to sell books. But Mike was my dorm director. And Rusty Jones, who is the longest tenured guy in the NFL, still there. He's in Indy. He retired once and is back again. Rusty's probably in his, I don't even know what year. I mean, he might be close to his 40th year in the NFL, 35. He was a GA football coach at Springfield when I was there. And the weight training teacher had just left University of Hawaii, where his mentor was Bill Starr. So, I mean, this is where I'm at Springfield College. I am, if you've read Outliers, right? I'm in the freaking hothouse. I'm in the Mecca. Rob Lasorsi, Rob in the track world. Have you guys ever run across Rob? So Rob was my training partner. Rob was a thrower a year behind me. So Rob and I used to just go and lift with the throwers because I was like a wannabe football player who was kind of lost. I realized, I said lack of size, lack of talent caught up with me in college. And, but I just, I found the weight room and I found these guys and I just go work out with the throwers. And then I get into like bigger, faster, stronger stuff and looking at Stefan Fernholm, who's unfortunately dead now. Greg Shepard used to write all these articles about Stefan Fernholm and, running a 4.340 at 260, and what he was doing from a training standpoint. And that led me literally, we were talking about this with another guy. I did another podcast today. I literally, or people say, I don't know if I did or I didn't, but I was maybe the first person to ever train somebody for the NFL Combine. And there's a book called The Draft. This guy, Pete Williams, says I invented it at Combine training. And I'm like, I don't know if I did, but I don't know anybody who was doing it before me. So I probably can. I always say I'm taking credit because Pete said I did. So it's in a book. It's been recorded that I invented training for the Combine. So I'm going.
You're also associated with Chris Doyle and Boyd Epley as well, right?
Yeah, not Boyd. I never really knew Boyd more than, personally, but Chris was one of my players. So I was Chris's, first strength coach. I got him into strength and conditioning. Chris was a football coach. He was the offensive coordinator at Holy Cross. And I still remember him calling me and saying, I'm thinking about going into strength and conditioning. And I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be the smartest thing you ever did. Get off the freaking road. You don't have to recruit anymore. You don't have to deal with all the bullshit. You'll be so much happier.
He was making $1 million a year at Iowa.
Yeah, I know. Dwayne Carlisle was one of my first athletes at BU who ended up being the 49ers strength coach for a while. He was one of our jumpers, but he was a kid walk on. He walked on at BU, started training with this kid, Billy Brooks, who was the first guy I trained for the Combine. Billy Brooks played like 15 years in the NFL. And actually was like director of community relations for the Colts for a while. That was his last job before he retired. But, and this is how, how small the world is, but Billy and Dwayne trained together, and Billy was just super meticulous, was just wanted to get better. And I was just running around to conferences trying to figure out how to keep up with Billy. But Dwayne jumped in with him and went, I think his long jump increased by like 3 feet that year. And he got a full scholarship to Maryland. Maryland came in and scooped him out of BU's literally off their team, was like, okay, kid, we got a full scholarship for you here at Maryland to be this. So I only had Dwayne for a year. But we've had a lot of guys, guys that went on to become strength and conditioning coaches from those kind of early years. But it's, the world gets very, very small. It's really funny. So Billy Brooks's girlfriend in college was a woman named Sybil Smith, who was a swimmer at Boston University, one of the few African-American swimmers that we had. But her daughter is Sloane Stevens, who the tennis player. I'm watching tennis one day and I'm looking at the women in the stands and I'm like, Sloane Stevens, but Sybil Smith married this guy, John Stevens, who was a running back for the Patriots. And they had a daughter who's now like, one of the top 10 in the world, but another one of our like child of our BU athletes. It's crazy.
Coach, we got a question here. How would you program in season for professional baseball? How much sprinting and weight room volume would you shoot for each week?
All right. So it's really interesting. So because I've done 2 years of professional baseball, and I think you did some stuff in the baseball world the last couple of years. You have 3 distinctly different groups of people in baseball. Baseball is as unique a sport as there is in the world, in the sense that you have 5 starting pitchers who are in their own world. They're the alpha males, they're the studs, and they're in an off-season program all year round, basically. You've got 10 or 12 relief pitchers who are, they're not the alphas. They're kind of the betas. They're like not the starters, but they have to be ready to pitch any day, anytime. And then you got position players. Like with position players, it's like you do the least you can possibly do, because the position players, literally, there's nothing. Baseball is ungodly in terms of what they ask you to do. It's 100, I think it's 160 games in 170 days or something. Like there's 10 off days. And of those off days, like if you're the Red Sox, if you're a coastal team, 5 of those off days are coast to coast travel the night before. So you would do, once the season starts, the amount of sprinting and running for position players is very, very minimal, because those guys are just unbelievably stressed out. They're getting 20-minute lifts a week, and they're going to hang on by their fingernails to get to the end of the year. With your pitchers, it's totally different, in terms of, with pitchers, and again, if I was back doing it right now, I'd be feed the cats. We'd have, 2 days, we'd have the timer out and we'd be running 10s. Because
running polls.
What?
You're not a polls guy?
No, we would never run polls. We did run, actuality, we did run some polls, because some of the things with the pitches is you just want to get them doing something. And polls aren't the worst thing in the world, compared to, guys putting their army boots on and going for 5-mile runs. It's like, baseball is pretty scary in terms of how far behind they can be, particularly with some of your older veteran guys. But the starters are on basically what amounts to like a kind of bastardized 5-day off-season program. Like we would do like a lower body day, upper body day, combo day off pitch. And that would just roll over week after week after week. The pitchers, the relief pitchers were 2-day total body. And they were much more intensive than the position players, because again, you got a guy who might be asked to throw 10 pitches. The vast majority, like if your long guy was only getting used if you were getting shelled by somebody, and then that long guy might go in and have to throw 40 pitches. And then you might have to do something interesting with him, the next couple of days. But what we did with our pitchers is we just assigned workout days with the relievers. So relievers lifted Tuesday, Friday all the time, so that no one would ever say, well, I just pitched yesterday, I have to pitch today. Whatever it was, like, we were like, doesn't matter. Tuesday, Friday. And they ran, every day they do some type of running. But even at that time, and this was 2012, 13, we probably didn't do enough high-speed running, but trying to get these guys just to do some high-speed running and to do some basic plyos, getting them to do, box jumps. We did a lot of, I have an MVP shuttle. We used our MVP shuttle a lot because we had some big ass pitchers who did not have great strength to body weight ratios. We had John Lackey, Josh Beckett, Andrew Miller, all of them over 6'4", all of them over 200 pounds, all of them absolute stud pitchers, but not super strong lower halves relative to like a John Lester, who was, Lester looked like Brian Urlacher's brother, like he was a totally different guy. So, baseball, I could talk about baseball forever because of the uniqueness too. And even with pitching, I was just talking to one of my other friends, Craig Breslow, who's assistant GM for the Cubs now. He was 5'10", 185 and a left-handed reliever. And we had Andrew Miller, who was 6'7" and about 205 and a left-handed reliever. and they couldn't have been more different in every aspect of it. But the biggest thing with baseball is just getting them, well, all pro sports, compliance. Anytime I would be involved in the pro sports world, then my number one goal would be compliance. How many workouts? Because, when I worked for 10 years for the Bruins in the 90s, and the more our compliance went up over that 10-year period, the more our injury rate went down. I could literally track and say, okay, we got, X hundred number of workouts in this week or this year as a team, and this was our man games lost. Next year, we got that up by 10%, and our man game shifted down by 10%. The biggest thing with all this stuff to me is it's not rocket science at all by any stretch of the imagination. It's much more just about getting people to do basic shit well. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Well and consistent. Have you guys read Slight Edge?
No.
Oh, read Slight Edge. You'll love Slight Edge. Jeff Olson. Show up consistently, show up with a great attitude. Those are Slight Edge principles 1, 2, and 3. But it's a really good book.
You also mentioned Think Like a Freak. That's one of your favorites.
I love Think Like a Freak, but because that quote, I mean, that's you and me, right? The conventional wisdom is often wrong.
Yeah.
And acceptance of it can lead to bad outcomes. And that's, I think, so much of, whether it's like, think about track, right? Like you guys, I mean, I was at Boston University. We had a top 10 national track program. We had world-class throwers. We had world-class jumpers. We did not have world-class sprinters. We had world-class distance runners. We had 3 7-foot high jumpers when I was first there. We had guys that placed in the NCAA in the shot. We had guys that placed in the NCAA in the discus, guys that placed in the NCAA in the hammer. And it's like, I don't know. Track is just a different world because all the rest of the kids were just getting screwed. It was, I had a track coach that tell me one time that the ideal distance runner would be legs and lungs. If you could remove everything else, that would give you the best possible chance of high performance. And no, like I always said, track coaches, I gave up on track coaches 30 years ago. I used to tell people, don't even listen to track coaches. They don't know what they're talking about. Because you know what track was to me? What I saw in track was, hey, you know something, Tony? You suck at the 100. We're going to try you in the 2. And if you suck at the 2, we're going to try you in the 4. And if you suck at the 4, we're going to try you in the 8. And if you suck at the 8, we're going to make you into a really good miler because you're a worker, Tony. You love to work. We're just going to put miles on you, and you're going to get better. And I'm like, no one got better. They got in better shape. Probably they were able to maintain their slowness longer and have it be less relevant to the outcome of the race. But I didn't know anybody in the East who could coach a sprinter. Not one person. There was not even a person to talk to when I was like, in my youth about sprinting. And in some ways I'm lucky, I found, and as much as Vern Gambetta can be the crotchety old man of strength and conditioning,
Yes.
guys like that were really helpful. Don Chu was really helpful. I always tell Don Chu, I make fun of him. I'm like, Don, when I was a kid, you were my idol. And he gets pissed because he's like 70 now and I'm 60, whatever. But, but when I was 20, he was 30, and he was literally writing the book on plyometrics. I look at that book now and think, I don't really like that book. But at the time that he wrote it, it was a groundbreaking piece of literature. So, it was really hard. We found the late Brent McFarlane was great. I found some of these guys through the NSCA when the NSCA was still a real conference, not the amateur hour for $100 a talk. And, they brought in, they literally had the best people in the world that were there, and you got to listen to them, but there wasn't enough. Speaking of that, you'll appreciate this. And Chris is probably like, holy shit, can this guy ramble? Yeah, I think I've talked for 42 of the 43 minutes that we've been on here, but, I contacted Kevin O'Donnell the other day because I still use my Speed Dynamics videos. I have digitized them. They're on my computer. I still show them to my staff, the Seagraves and O'Donnell video. And somebody had said to me that they knew Kevin O'Donnell and he's like in the insurance world or something. And I just sent him a message on Twitter and was like, hey, Kevin, I just want you to know that I still show the videos and your stuff is great. And there isn't enough good stuff like that out there still. And there isn't. I mean,
So he doesn't coach
guys are
anymore.
changing track. What?
He's out of coaching.
He's out of coaching. I think he's in the insurance business, in all honesty. The other thing, and I'm going to tell you guys this, you guys need to get out of the like track football, right? Two sports that are dying. You guys have an unbelievable idea that is like a lot of what I'm doing now is lacrosse because of my son, but you guys have so much more ability to impact people beyond the world that you're living in right now. You've got to really focus on that and realize that like baseball people need you and soccer people need you and lacrosse people need you, and don't make them find you through football. That's just my
weird.
advice.
It's weird you say that because I have a 45-minute Zoom scheduled with the University of Pennsylvania lacrosse on Friday, and supposedly they're pretty good at lacrosse. I had no idea. The head lacrosse coach,
the Aggies are good.
The head lacrosse coach at University of Virginia emailed me a couple of days ago wanting some stuff, and I heard they were pretty good too. And so, and then
like top
Devin
five.
McConnell,
You know why? Because my friend Jamie Monroe and I have been banging the time 10 drum. Jamie's like a big influencer in the lacrosse world. And all these people know who you are because I've been telling everybody who you are. I've been telling like, hey, seriously, like I'm like, if you want to get better, the easiest way to get somebody better is to make them faster.
Yeah.
I mean, because when you look, like I've been really lucky in terms of like I've worked with elite people in every sport. And the best ones are the fastest. The best athlete I've ever worked with in my life is Carl Crawford. And Carl Crawford is just fast. Carl Crawford could do standing backflips at 230 pounds at 30 years old. And I always said, Carl was a 280 hitter who was a 250 hitter, but was really fast. He'd get 10, 12 infield hits a year that nobody else was going to get just because of how unbelievably athletic he was, and it's so that would just be, that's my unsolicited advice.
Hey, Chris, I was going to ask you the point that Michael made about track coaches not knowing what in the hell they're doing in terms of sprint coaching. It'd be interesting to hear what percentage of, let's say, college sprint coaches do you think truly know how to make a sprinter better?
You asking Chris or me?
Chris.
Chris.
I don't know a lot of those people.
You know what the athletes come back and tell you, though.
I know what they come back and tell me, so I'm gonna say it's not a lot.
What?
80-20 maybe at best.
No.
And probably 95-5 if we were trying to be super honest.
I know at the high school level, it's probably about the same. It just all goes back to the idea that God makes sprinters and coaches make milers.
Yeah.
And it's like everybody loves speed in football and track, but then they really don't do anything to grow it. And when you time, as you know, when you start timing, it not only motivates the athletes, but it motivates the coach. When you see kids getting faster, you're onto something.
Oh yeah. I told you, Holy Grail. I got the picture of the Holy Grail in the presentation. I mean, it is absolutely the Holy Grail. It is the missing piece. And like, I look at everybody, and in some ways I'm like, I hope no one figures it out, at least maybe till my kid gets to college and lacrosse. But, and then everybody can figure it out after that, because I'm checking out in 3 more years and you'll be finding me on the beach somewhere. But yeah, it's just, it's amazing to me. But like I said, if you think about, Pareto principle, 80-20, 80-20 holds up in just about every area of life. And maybe, as you said, it might be less than 20. But as I said, I did not find very many people who I felt knew not only more than me about sprinting, but even knew what I knew. Even had watched what I watched, had gone out, like, I was one of these people, like, I had watched all the Seagrave and O'Donnell videos. I had watched everything Vern Gambetta had put out. I read Charlie Francis training system. Then I read Speed Trap. Then I read Angela Isajenko's biography, which I can't remember the name
And
of.
then you drank beer with Charlie Francis, did you?
No, I didn't. I never met him. No, that's why
I
I
thought
drank
you
beer
had.
with Clyde Hart, your man Clyde Hart, which was, I'm telling you, one of the highlights of my life. 80 whatever year old Clyde. He, because, and you may have, you have differing opinions in terms of training on Clyde,
Right.
but what a cool guy.
Sure he was.
Oh,
Well, his charisma is what allowed him to have great athletes in spite of his training.
right. No, and also his training was much better than what a lot of other people were doing. I mean, there's a relative scale there. And the other thing is, if you can get involved in great natural selection, genetics is the key to this whole thing. Because I mean, feed the cats, we could cross out that, the FEED behind you and put an I and an N in there and say, find the cats,
Yes.
because, it's really about finding the cats. And if you can find the cats and then just, okay, leave the cats alone,
Yeah.
and let them be cats.
Just feed them then.
Because I remember in Charlie Francis, whether it was in Speed Trap or in Charlie Francis training system, he talked about how Ben Johnson used to hide on long running days. Like Ben would run out with everybody else and then would sleep under the stands. He would literally lay down and then he'd wait till everybody came back. And, when everybody came back, he'd come springing out and run in with them like freaking Rosie Ruiz at the Boston Marathon. And the difference was inherently these super neural people know what's good for them. And then we literally try to feed them a diet of shit. Like, let's figure out if there's a way we can make you worse. And I can tell you, I have one of my friends who was a really good miler, who's now a business executive. But, he talks about the fact he never ran as fast as he ran in high school. And I can't tell you how many people I talk to in the track world who say, I never ran as fast as I ran in high school.
Probably 80-20.
Yeah, 80-20.
It's worse than that.
Yeah, Dan has a great, I don't know if you've ever heard.
BYU did research and it's 5% is the actual number.
Really? Well, I remember Dan, and I actually sent me the story. I have it in my email because I'm going to use it. But I listened to on a podcast one time, and he was talking about how when he got his first high school track job, he said, logically, I went to the basketball team to get some middle distance guys. He said, and I got these, guys, and they came out and they ran whatever, 50 point, the first meet that we ran. And I was like, hey, these guys are going to be pretty good. He said, I managed to coach them all spring and get them to 52. And he said, and after that, I realized that I was doing something wrong. And, and the difference with a guy like Dan is, he was just looking at straight cause effect. Okay, what I did didn't work. And that's the thing with track is you should be able to look at it and think, if I hurt half the people that I train and those that stay alive get slower, you should probably look at yourself and say, I'm not a very good track coach, right? But we'd have people all the time, like person after person, everybody's hurt. Everybody's in the training room. Everybody's got a stress fracture. Everybody's got, something wrong with them and they're slower. And everybody's, they're trying to blame me like it's all the weight room. I'm like, it's not the weight room. You don't get stress fractures in the weight room. You don't get plantar fasciitis in the weight room. You don't get iliotibial band syndrome in the weight room. You get it from doing too much volume. But I mean, and like I said, and we had, at the early time that I was there, we were a national power in track. And then they took our scholarships away and we downshifted. And when we did, it was brutal.
You also said in your presentation that if a kid shows up to your facility and he's not feeling well, if he's fatigued, beat up, something like that, you just tell him not to sprint.
Right. Oh yeah. We never sprint. If you don't feel perfect, and I always say, I have another one of my presentations. I always talk about, the idea that, all these kids are liars. I have an X-Files slide that says, trust no one. And, it's basically, what you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. I tell our coaches all the time, I train our coaches to watch people. If people are rubbing their backs or rubbing their knees or they're over on the side stretching, I'm like, those are all bad signs. And those are all people that we don't want sprinting. Because I want, like you always talk about, right? Don't let today's workout ruin tomorrow's workout. I want zero injuries. I don't want one person to pull a muscle. And in all honesty, last summer, we had one kid with a pre-existing hamstring problem who pulled a muscle. Sorry. I apologize. My son's FaceTime is hooked up to my computer too, so he may get dinged with a couple of those. But yeah, there's. I mean, honestly, it is crazy. The good thing, and I always say, so I tell our staff this all the time. The good thing is, I always say, in the shallow pool, the midget stands out. You don't have to be really good in our field for people to think you're really good. You just have to not be really bad.
I always say that dumb always beats dumber.
You're right.
I mean, you can be dumb and you will beat a dumber coach.
Yeah. And there's so many, because, and this is where you've done a really good job of getting people to sort of examine, like, the grind. Like, we're at the point now, that's the other thing. We do almost no conditioning. And we used to do a lot. We used to push our kids really hard, but it was probably because the kids weren't involved in so much outside sport at the time when we were doing it. And then we just sort of kept doing it because we felt like we should. I'm sorry about that. I keep declining his call, and I'm hoping my son is going to have a half a brain and call him back. I'm going to text him right now and say, call Darren back. Okay, come on. I keep hanging up on you. Sorry. I'm literally going to text my son right now and be like, call Darren back. So stop calling me. Sorry, where were we? This is what the problem with kids.
You're pretty old to have such a young kid.
I am pretty old to have such. You're absolutely right. I was a late bloomer. I always say there's only one way to not have kids, and I wasn't signing up for that. So, yeah, we have my daughter. I have a 21-year-old and a 15-year-old. So my daughter was born when I was 40, and my son when I was 45.
How good of a hockey player is your daughter?
In all honesty, she's very, very good. I think she was second in the nation in Division I in power play goals last year. And I think she was the third or fourth American in goals. She was, I think, 10th or 12th in goals in Division I. She had 22 goals, but I think she was third or fourth American. So she's pretty good.
And now, do you speed train her?
Yep, we do the same. They ran sprints today. They just time 10s, her and her friend. I got her friend who's with her downstairs was on our last Olympic team. She's staying with us for a couple of weeks. Caleb Barnes, she made the Olympics. She was in that gold medal team, that won in overtime. And they were sprinting. Everybody sprinted today. I've got the top women's lacrosse attack player in the world, Kayla Trainer. She sprinted today. I've got the top women's defenseman in the world, this Megan Keller, who you've seen on my Instagram, who's 5'11", 165, and she's running 20-yard flies. I think she's run like 111. She's almost in the 10s. And we've got one girl, Alex Carpenter, whose dad was Bobby Carpenter, who was a first-round pick or a first overall pick in the NHL draft, like in 80-something. She's run 106 with a 20-yard fly. So our girls are getting fast. And it's funny, Alex is the worst-looking runner of the bunch, and she's the fastest. And that's the other thing I tell people all the time. I'm like, it goes back to that's the Clyde Hart conversation, because we were talking about Michael Johnson, and everybody said Michael ran wrong, and he said, I'm watching the Olympics and I'm watching on TV and I'm listening to a marathoner and a high jumper tell me that the world record holder in the 400 meters runs wrong, and I'm like, yeah, he apparently runs right, because you can look at it and say it's wrong, but if it's the world record, it's right, regardless of how you feel about back extension or forward lean or backward lean or whatever. The guy, the fastest, that's the beauty of this though, right? The fastest guy is the fastest guy. There's no, it's not like gymnastics, or diving or whatever, we're not adding in degree of difficulty or, taking points off for not pointing your toes, or it's like, nope, here's the event, A to B. Guy that gets to be the fastest is the fastest guy. That's the beauty of it for me. What else we got? We can go a few minutes longer. Sorry, because I talk too much. You guys probably actually have questions you want me to answer. So
the bike study story that you gave in your presentation, I think that's a hell of a story, because I always told my chemistry kids the same type of story, that we are what we do. we are not what we listen to or see. We are what we do. So we have to do chemistry in order to truly learn it. And I would always give the story of, what if we brought a football team into the classroom every day and they were the most knowledgeable football team in America? Would they win on Friday night without being on the field? And the kids would say, no, they'd get killed. And that's kind of the way we do education these days, is that we talk about stuff and we don't do enough. And so can you encapsulate that bike story?
Yeah. So the book is called Most Likely to Succeed, and it's really about the education system. It's a guy named Ted Dintersmith, who's an educational consultant based in Boston. And I forget the others, two authors, but Dintersmith is the one whose name rings a bell. But I loved, he said, if we taught bicycle riding in school, he said every kid would know every part of the bicycle. Every kid would understand, gearing ratios. He'd know how to spell derailleur. There are all these things that he'd know about bikes, but no one would ever ride a bike. And I remember, and it's funny because I've taken a different view of education since then. My father, again, was a high school principal, and education was really important in my house. But they start out the book, Dintersmith says in the book, like, give it up. You're never going to be smarter than your phone. Like, don't worry about it. The knowledge economy is dead. Like, you don't need to know math facts. You don't need to know, you can literally say, like, Siri, what's this? And Siri's going to tell you faster than you can look it up. But the soft skill stuff, the ability like this, the ability to talk, the ability to write, the ability to do a presentation, all of these things are what are going to carry our kids into the next generation, unless they are some, odd specialist, like an engineer, or, there may be certain things where they'll need that kind of knowledge economy. But even with engineering, they said in this book, they said nobody except contractors uses math beyond the 8th grade level.
Wow.
Right. But then think about it. Do you know anybody that does?
Chris, do you use math?
No.
No, I mean, I never took calculus. I don't even, I can barely squeak out like an algebraic equation in Excel, to be able to figure out what I want the cell to read. And that's about as mathematical as I get. And it tells you when the formula is wrong. You get a little error message. It tells you that, like, okay, you got your parenthesis in the wrong place, move it. And then you move it and you're back at it. So, yeah, I think there's, the good thing is, and someone asked me, the guy I was talking to today asked me this, the fact that we have access to so much information now, if you think about it again, like, Chris, how old are you?
52.
Okay, 52. So you're like a generation removed from Tony and I. But when Tony and I started, you had to wait for like the next Strength and Health to come out, or the next Iron Man to come out, or, whatever magazine you were going to read to get information. I can remember walking to the store, the smoke shop, literally on a daily basis at the end of the month to look and see if the new magazines were in. Because that's where we're going to get our information. I mean, I had a guy interview me. He said, what's been the greatest technological advance during the course of your career? I looked at him. I said, without a doubt, the computer. And he was like, what? I was like, the computer. I said, when I started doing this, we didn't have a computer. No one had a computer. I had a yellow legal pad. Like, I wrote guys' names down. Like, we mimeographed sheets. We did things that people would look at now and think like, no, cavemen did that. People that traveled, in covered wagons did that. And I'm like, no, this was how, when we did testing, if we wanted to do something, even then, like, the word processor was a big deal. We could type up sheets and print them out. So it's,
And long distance phone calls cost money.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of money back then.
And imagine, but the whole idea of thinking about, I can remember one of my clients, this was in the 90s, probably, it was actually 96 or 7, telling me about the internet. He was a chemistry professor at Boston University where I worked. And he was like, Mike, you got to see this internet thing. This is going to be huge. And I couldn't, he was talking about like, oh, you got to download Netscape and do this and do that. And I mean, I had no idea what he was talking about at all. It made no sense to me. And never realizing that what he had seen was going to change the world. But he said to me in 1997, you need to get your stuff up on the internet. And I was like, I don't even know what the internet is.
Yeah, I think I got email in 98.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
My email address is 22 years old.
Well, yeah, you're AOL, right? Are you AOL?
No, it's Yahoo.
Oh, you're Yahoo. Okay, so I'm AOL. So I'm about the same time, but I always said AOL is code for old.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, actually, Mike, but that's all right.
Yeah. No, I would say that. I apologize to people when I tell them, when I read my email address off, I'm like at AOL.com. And I'm like, I know. I said, I have an AOL. I think I still pay, honestly. I swear to God, I think I pay for internet. Like $9 a month on my credit card. I have to
So
figure out how to do it, but I refuse to go to Gmail because Google is a scam. The worst customer service company in the history of the world.
the one of the more interesting questions, how come people got so pissed off when you put on a speed clinic?
Oh my God. Well, that was man, what's his oh God, I should Latif. Latif thinks that I shouldn't be able to speak about speed. Although I was teaching people about speed before Latif was born, literally. When there were no track coaches.
Really pissed at you.
But and the difference was if they just listened to what I said, it would have made perfect sense because what I'm talking about is what I'm doing. But they were mad. They were like, you don't have any right, you can't talk about speed. And I was kind of like, imagine if I went to you, Chris, Chris, I don't want you talking about single leg training anymore. You can't talk, you don't know, you're not a weight room guy, you're a track guy. Don't stop talking about strength because you're a sprint guy. Like stay in your lane, buddy. But that's what they wanted me to do. But I was talking to Jonas Dodo about it. And Jonas said, the reason people get mad at you is because they're afraid. Because I have reach, I have clout. And I have opinions and I'm old and I don't care. I'm like you. I'm at the point where I don't really give a shit what anybody thinks. So if I offend somebody, I'm offending them out of a sincere desire to help them improve. And if they don't like it, tough shit. I mean, whatever. I always said, I'll come home. The dogs will be here. My kids will be here. My wife will be here. Life will still be just as good. But yeah, it's amazing that, but that's very representative of our field. Incredible professional jealousy. It's like the crab analogy, when you put the crabs in the bucket, if one of them tries to crawl out, the rest of them jump up and pull them back down. I mean, everybody like, no, we're all going to be poor and suck together. Like, this is what we're going to do. Like, no one's getting out of the bucket. And, and then if you get out of the bucket, the resentment that you got out of the bucket is, so high because we're supposed to be poor. We're coaches, right? I mean, that's the whole idea. Like, it's like a monk order where you take this vow of poverty. And if you try to earn any money, everybody gets pissed at you. Like, I can't believe look at you charging people.
Yeah, it's weird when you're online. Like I have about 10 professional trolls that, I just had to mute them, block them, all that kind of stuff. But still, they have parties online talking about me. And if you get a handful of people really after you online, it feels like it's a revolution.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, join the club. You've made it, big guy. That's influence right there. When you got 10 of your own trolls, when you're muting and blocking, I'm that way. I have people like, and again, I could name names, but it doesn't do any good. But it's amazing, the people that you have to mute or block. Because again, even in the track world, and I'll just say very close to you guys, there are some incredible phonies who are professional trolls, and who don't coach anybody and who have never coached anybody. And if you follow their Twitter feed, you would be like, they must have Olympians living outside their house, except they don't, and they've never coached any. And the bad part about the internet is that there's no editor. Like there should be, like some guys should be like I'm the editor of the internet. Like I'm going to be able to call bullshit on stuff and be able to say, wait, could you just, show me like, okay, you said you coached numerous Olympians. Could I just have their names and their events? Because when you throw that out there at people and say, could you just tell me the names and the events of the Olympians that you coached? And then I always tell people, whenever anybody says they can't tell you, they're full of shit. They're lying. Because I've trained literally the most famous, like actors, whatever, all kinds of people, athletes.
Now, wait, I want to know what actors you've trained.
Dennis Leary.
Really?
Yeah, Dennis is awesome. He's like the coolest guy ever. Jennifer Garner. I trained Jennifer Garner for a while. which was she's like one of the nicest women that you're like. She is literally as nice as she seems in every interview that she does. She used to come in train with my BU guys. She'd literally walk in like, "Hi boys, good morning," and the guys would all be like, looking like, seriously, like I can't even believe. When she was first coming, I told there were two guys in the waiting with me. I'm like, okay. I said, because I for about a week I didn't know if this was going to happen. And like my friend who I was setting me up with her was like, Jennifer's coming to Boston. Jennifer's coming to Boston. Jennifer's coming to Boston. And then she didn't come to Boston. And then I get the phone call like, I'm on my way from Cambridge. And I looked at these two guys and said, okay, just so you know, I said, a minute from now, Jennifer Garner is going to get out of the elevator and walk into the weight room. You guys just act casual, like no big deal. Like she's been here 100 times. And of course, instead, they just literally run into the locker room and text everybody on the hockey team to let them know that Jennifer Garner is now in the weight room. So it was, but my point is that Jennifer was the only person who ever said, don't mention my name, because she didn't want people to know she was in Boston. And then she said, but I'll make it up to you. And she literally, I have the video. She thanked me on David Letterman, like by name on the David Letterman show. And she did it on purpose. And she was like, yeah, I couldn't, because at the time, like, it was like through the Ben Affleck thing and People magazine, all these magazines were calling me, and I'm like, I don't know where she is. I don't have any contact with her. And she said, if you just tell these people I'm not here, I'll make it up to you at some point. And then someone sends me a clip of her on David Letterman talking about her time in Boston and training at Boston University with the hockey players and Mike Boyle. But my point is just that whenever anybody says that I have secret clients, they're full of shit, because no one ever says, don't mention my name ever. It just, at least not in my experience, I've never had that happen. Not an athlete or anybody else. But so that's my my brief treatise on trolls.
Oh, what's your future? Would be the perfect last question.
My future is to get my son through high school lacrosse and into college. Hopefully, I think the odds are that he's going to be a Division I player, I think. So once that part is done, then I'm going to figure out, I keep trying to say to him, I've been saying like, hey, Jacksonville plays Division I lacrosse. Tampa plays Division I lacrosse. High Point plays Division I lacrosse. Like, there's some beautiful Southern schools where your mother and I could go and retire. I keep threatening him. It's going to be like old school. I'm going wherever he's going, and I'm going to like buy a frat house and hang around with him for the next 4 years. That'll be my future. I'll be like drinking beer and buying liquor for underage kids. But not really. That's a joke, just in case. So the trolls will be posting that one. But
yeah, you realize that will be the clip. That will be the clip I'm going to post.
Yeah. But so the future for me really is, I'd like to figure out at some point an exit strategy from my business. And I'd like to just spend 4 years, because I'm like you. Like, if you think about this, he's 15. He's got 3 more years. He graduates. He's 18. I'm 64. By the time he graduates from college, I'm 68, 9. Yeah, I want to enjoy that time. I want to be able to see, like, even with my daughter, she's at Robert Morris in Pittsburgh, and I went every weekend. I flew, my wife and I, as much as we could. And if she didn't, I did. I saw almost every game. That's really what the future is for me. And the great thing is I can still do stuff like this forever, or at least as long as people continue to be interested. And I'll probably do more of this. My wife and I have talked about, because like you probably now, I get lots of opportunities to travel, but it's just impractical when someone says, do you want to come to Australia and talk? I'm like, I'd love to go to Australia and talk, but I don't have 2 weeks to kiss my athletes goodbye and, go someplace and, not mind my business and do the things that I need to do. But I'd like to be able to do some of that stuff. I'd like to go to a Premier League game in England. I'd like to go to Australia. There's a lot of things I'd like to do, but I got one more shift left here of high school, and then I can start to think about that.